Welcome everyone to this Ask Sense final open event. Today's session is a session that will be focusing on any frequently asked questions that you might have to ask. For those of you that you have already emailed me questions, I will work through them next week and I will respond to them in detail. Uh, so don't worry if I haven't covered the issues that you would like to raise. I'm going to be recording this session as I have done with all the Ask Sense sessions so far. And I will be putting the recording onto our website for you to review should you wish. Before we start, I've got a few slides and some introductory slides about SENSS for those of you that you haven't been in one of the previous webinars. I have put together some of the frequently asked questions on slides, and I'll try to answer them. But I would be more than happy to start by opening the floor and saying, are there any questions from those of you that you are attending? There are two ways you can ask questions. You can either come on mic, you could raise your hand and come on mic, or you could put those questions in the chat box and I will be picking them up and responding to them. So feel free to use one or the other way for asking any particular questions for your application or the process or the system or anything like that. So I'll pause here for a couple of seconds, and what I'll do is I'll ask whether there is anybody who has particular questions that they want to ask, and I will be more than happy to answer those questions. If not, I'll start with a few slides. And then as I'm going through those slides, if you've got more questions, if questions are generated, please feel free to stop me and put them in the chat or raise your hand. So I'm not going to go through the length of the presentation that I gave in the previous two webinars. The recordings are on the website. You can review them. They're about 2 hours each. Where I give quite a lot of information on SENSS. I will very, very briefly. Yes, Rosemary.
Good morning, everyone.
Rosemary.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Your sound is not particularly.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Yes.
Okay. My question is about the transcript. I attended the webinar on Wednesday. So I want to ask, I'm currently doing my master's to end in September 2024. So I don't know if I can use the transcript for the spring semester to apply for the SENSS scholarship.
What am I? So the question, Rosemary, I'll repeat the question just for the recording, just in case the sound is not captured properly. So the question is around, I'm currently studying, and that could be for undergraduate or master's degree. It's exactly the same thing. I haven't finished my studies. I'm expecting to finish my studies in September or over the summer of 2024. What am I supposed to submit? So what you need to do is you need to ask your home institution to provide you with the most recent transcript. Obviously, for master students, that might include only a few things because we're still in the first semester. You might not have your results yet, or you might have only partial results. For undergraduate students, that transcript could easily cover the first and the second year, and if there are any marks for the third year, and you should upload that transcript onto the system. The process will then be that your home institution, in making you an offer, they will make you what we call a conditional offer. And the offer will be, where the letter will say something along the lines, we're offering you a position for our PhD program, but in order to start the PhD program or the master's, if you're an undergraduate student, you will have to provide us with the completed transcript with a degree. So this is, and in September or October, just before you start, you will have to submit that transcript to your home institution.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I've got Paula has a question. So Paula emailed me this morning, so I'll pick up those questions. They're quite interesting. Um, Offer letter for your home institution with regards to the PhD. So just to remind you in terms of the context here, in order to be eligible to apply for SENSS, you will have to apply for a PhD place in one of the 8 universities first. Without having that place, you can't apply for SENSS funding. So there are 2 steps in the process. One step is you apply for a PhD and then you apply for the funding. So in the process of applying for the PhD, you will probably get an offer letter from the university. It's not a requirement for SENS to upload that offer letter. Why? Because in the first stage of the application for SENS, the home institutions will nominate students for the SENS competition. And in that sense, the home institutions will check whether students hold already a place, hold an offer with them. So from our side, there is no need to upload that offer letter. The case of support document, I think I need to double check if that appears on your screen. If it does appear, please disregard it. It's for a separate competition. So, and I'll make sure I'll take that with the admin team who's managing the system. So if the system is asking you or is giving you the option to upload a case for support, please disregard it. There is no need to upload anything under that heading. Now, there is a more specific section around research methods, training skills. Again, let me put it, let me give you some context and background of that section. So this section, which asks you about your prior training, is a section that we would like you to give us as much information as possible. The reason for that is because we will be using this section in order to make decisions about your length of studies and the amount of time we will be giving you for your studies. So for people that haven't done much research training in the past, the tendency will be to give them, the 4.5 years of funding. For people that have done quite a lot of research training and they're almost prepared, ready to do a PhD, we will be giving you the 3.5 years, which is the default, the standard. Now, in that section, there are a number of questions which try to ask you about the different skills you have developed. And in reality, you've got 2 areas through which you could justify your coverage of those skills. One area, obviously, is your academic degree. Is your studies, your existing studies, what you have done. You could refer to specific modules you've done. You could refer to specific additional activities you have done. The other area where you could draw from is if you've got any professional experience. And I have had in the case in the past people that, they have done an undergraduate degree and then they have worked as a researcher in an organization, and through that professional experience, they have developed a set of skills. So again, it's that information that you could utilize there. Remember, this section of the application is going to be quite important from our perspective in order to provide you and give you the right amount of time to complete the PhD. And it's also the case where the supervisor will review that section anyway, because the supervisor is the one that is going to make the recommendation for the length of study. So in terms of, if your research proposal does not directly address this area, so we would expect you to have some knowledge of basic scientific methods. But yes, you could argue that you could gain those skills through a graduate diploma in the past, or some professional experience, or any other activity that you feel. The rule of thumb for that section is give us as much information as possible and let us make the decision as to whether that information covers what we need to see or not. Uh, yes, if people are not talking, usually what I do is if I hear noise, I try to mute people myself. Is there any template for submitting a research proposal? There is no template per se, but I have in the webinars covered the key sections that a research proposal should include. And in short, I can go through them and tell you what these sections are. First of all, there needs to be a section around the introductory section. And in that section, you need to basically highlight why this proposal is important. You need to also address how your proposal fits with the theme you're applying to. It's the section where I would call, when I review a paper, the so what question. So what are we going to learn? Why do we want to do this piece of research? This usually is followed by a section which provides the background, or you could call it the literature review, or you could call it the state of the art in that particular discipline, um, where you basically do two things. First of all, you position yourself in that literature, and second, you identify the gap. The two tasks are interlinked, of course. So you identify the gap. You say, this is the gap in the state of the art. This is where my proposal basically fits. And what I've offered as advice in those webinars is that because the proposal has a relatively limited word count, don't try to go, you know, to references 20, 30, 40 years ago. Yes, of course, it's useful to have some of those seminal papers, but try to focus on what is happening with the literature at the moment. What has happened the last couple of years, what has happened the last few years in that area, and how your research is actually progressing that. Then the next section is around your, and of course that literature background section tends to conclude with the specific aims and objectives of the research. And then the next section is around your methodological approach. And what we would expect you to tell us there is through which methodological approaches you will be answering the questions you have set. Crucial for that section, as I said already in some of the webinars, and you could go back and review those. Crucial in that section is to also demonstrate awareness of particular issues you might be faced with when you're doing your methodology. An example I very frequently use is a lot of people say, I'm going to do surveys. We know that response rate for surveys is relatively low. So the panel, what they will be looking for is they will be looking for some reassurance that, not only you know how to design a survey, or you will learn how to design a survey if you haven't done it and you put it in your training plan, but also how you're going to ensure that you've got enough, you will have a good response rate. And if not, of course, are there any contingency plans? So sometimes people say, actually, if the survey doesn't go the way I'm planning it to go, we would probably have to do interviews, or we will probably have to rely on some secondary data. It's all appropriate. It doesn't have to be a very detailed explanation of your contingency plan. It's just to demonstrate to the panel that there is some awareness. And then, of course, the final section is a section which will talk about the impact of your research. Who do you expect to reach out to? Who do you expect to change the practice? Is it policy that you're thinking of changing? Is it practice in organizations that you're thinking of changing? Is it behavioral change? I have been reviewing a few proposals the last few days, which are dealing with behavioral change of people when it comes to green energy, and how do we measure that? How do we evaluate that? All these things, and of course these proposals say that they will be developing tools that not only they will measure behavior change, but they will also kind of influence behavior change. So this is the way the proposal should go about, and that's kind of a mini template that you could very quickly follow. Now, uh, I've got this question very frequently, whether there are any successful research proposal samples that we can share. The answer is no, and the answer is no because every single proposal is different, and therefore um, you might not get the right impression. Every single person reviews, writes the proposal in a slightly different way. But also, there is a big change between what happened in the competition last year and what is happening with the competition this year, and I think that's also interlinked about with the second part of your question around themes, and the answer there is that in the previous competitions, we used to follow a very disciplinary based approach. So your proposal would fit into business and management. The proposal would fit into psychology. The proposal would fit into sociology or social anthropology. And therefore, the researcher was writing a proposal that was addressing an audience specifically in that disciplinary area, and the evaluators of that proposal would come from that disciplinary area. Obviously, you know if you take psychology or business and management, there is a big variety of sub-disciplines in those two, but equally you would be talking to people that generally understand the context. This year, with the thematic approach, you will get people that understand the context, but you also will get people that might have different disciplinary backgrounds. So if, for example, you look at the sustainability and climate emergency theme, and I can actually put the themes there for you to refresh your memory. If you're thinking of submitting something in sustainability and climate emergency, you might get people from business and management, you might get people from environmental science, you might get people from sociology or social anthropology, you might get a whole range of individuals who could be potentially reviewing that proposal. So the way you need to write that proposal is obviously, yes, solid foundation in your perspective, but equally you need to be able to communicate to people outside your narrow disciplinary perspective how you're gonna address that. So even if you get access to um, proposals from last year or the last few years through your friends, through your connections, through people that might be studying in SENSS already, um, those proposals might have been written in a very, very different way. Now, in terms of the connecting themes, the answer is, look, I appreciate that there might be proposals that could go slightly across boundaries of the themes, but in your decision and in your application, you need to select one of those themes, which is going to be the dominant one, and you need to talk to this theme. And one of the ways I said you could do that is by looking at this table, and you could look at how your proposal is addressing ESRC priorities, which is the funder, the Economic and Social Research Council, how your proposal is addressing sustainable development goals and grand challenges. And you could link your proposal with that, and therefore you could decide which thematic area you could go into. Uh, there is the second question that Mariam is asking is whether we provide references from professionals, academics who you have worked with previously as part of the SENSS application, so not as part of your home institution application. Your home institution will probably ask you for references, but as part of the funding application, the SENSS application, you don't need to provide any references. And um, the panels that will evaluate your proposal will have as less information as possible about you outside your proposal. And the reason we're doing that is to remove any kind of unconscious bias. And um, studies have demonstrated very clearly that occasionally references create that unconscious bias, that to individuals. And of course, because those references will have been taken up at the institutional level, there is no need for us to almost double count. So take them into consideration again. So your application is going to be predominantly evaluated on the proposal you have submitted, your training, and the supervisory team. My master's transcript is available ready, but that of my undergraduate is going to be ready in due time. Could this be a challenge as my undergraduate grades? No, there is not a problem. What usually happens is institutions tend to ask you for your latest degree, and if you've done your master's, if you have your master's transcript, that is absolutely fine. Equally, as I said, um, it could be that the institution, because this is where you basically where transcripts get checked at the institutional level, the institution might make you an offer conditional on seeing that undergraduate degree transcript in September or in October. So I wouldn't worry too much about the administrative side of things in that sense, because a lot of the things can be subject to conditional offers, as I've mentioned. Um, can you clarify how funding for part-time study works? So funding for part-time works very similar to full-time. It is going to be on a pro rata basis. So if, for example, you decide to be 50% on the PhD and 50% on work or something else, then on a monthly basis, you will be receiving 50% of the stipend that you would have received if you were to do a full-time study. Um, Obviously, that gives us the opportunity to extend the amount of time. And so if, for example, you apply for a 3.5 years PhD and you get awarded a 3.5 years PhD, funding for that PhD, then it means that you will be receiving funding for 7 years altogether, but you will be getting half of the stipend on a monthly basis. The fees are waived anyway for full-time and part-time students, and therefore you don't need to worry about those. You won't have to pay any fees for the duration of your studies. Um, uh, Kirsty, was there anything else you wanted me to clarify about part-time? If you wanted, let me know, and I'll come back.
No, thanks. That's fine.
Fantastic. John is asking, I'm a Burmese and I want to study PhD in international studies, democracy subject or politics. Am I eligible to apply for that? Definitely yes. Um, the topic, or at least the keywords you're giving me there, suggest that you would probably be looking at two themes, and obviously it will depend on the specifics of the project. One of the two themes is the resolving uncertainty and addressing crisis. You could see there, there are things around migration, humanitarian crisis, pandemics, conflicts, cost of living, or of course, the justice institutions and social chains, where you talk about equality, diversity, and inclusivity, development, and institutions. So one of those two things. It gives me also here the opportunity to answer about international students. This is a question that very frequently comes up. I am an international student. Am I eligible to apply for funding? The answer is straightforward. Yes, you are eligible to apply for funding. Will I get exactly the same thing as a home student? The answer there is also yes. You will get exactly the same stipend. You will get exactly the same fee waiver. So the home institution won't come back and ask you for additional fees simply because you're an international student. We have guaranteed from all 8 institutions that they gonna waive completely the fees for home and international students. The only case where international students are treated in a slightly different way is at the final stage of the competition. And we need to abide by ESRC rules, and those ESRC rules very clearly say that we cannot award more than 30% of our studentships to international applicants. So in a sense, this equates to about 12 to 13 studentships out of the total of 36 on an annual basis. So that's the kind of cap that we have. And how does that work? There are no limitations to apply through the home university. There are no limitations to how many international applicants a home institution can put forward. There are no limitations to how many international applicants a thematic panel could recommend for the final stage. But when we get that big ranked list of all students from the top proposal to the 50th proposal, let's say, in terms of quality, we go down that list and we identify who's an international student. Once we reach the 13th, 14th of that group, we stop awarding to international students and we basically move on to the next ones. Now, if there are dropouts from international students, we substitute 1-to-1. So if there is a dropout from an international student, we will go further down that list to the first international student, and that person will receive the studentship. So this is the only time where we have to implement some form of quota. Just to remind you also, international students are those that everybody else except from British citizens, people who hold a pre-settled or settled status with the UK, or people that have indefinite leave to remain in the UK. So these four categories are automatically considered home students: British citizens, pre-settled, settled status, and indefinite leave to remain. Not sure if this question is relevant for now. I have started the PhD part-time in October. I'm doing my PhD part-time as I work full-time. I wonder how the 3-month placement might work in my situation. So the 3-month placement, it could be designed in a variety of ways. Just to give you an example, there will be students that will do that 3-month placement in 3 months. They will basically take time out of their PhD. They go, they do the placement 3 months, and they get out of the placement and return back to the PhD. Also, so that's the one extreme case, I say. The other extreme is someone who's doing the placement almost on a weekly basis for certain hours. So someone spends, for the duration of their PhD, let's say, half a day in that partner organization. So that's the kind of other extreme, the most flexible option. Now, in between those, there is a variety of ways you could do the placement. So, for example, you could say, I'll spend 1 day a week in that organization for I don't know, 5 months, 6 months. There is quite a lot of flexibility. And obviously, when you think about the placement, we will ensure that the placement is fits with what exactly you want to do with your PhD, but also the way you have structured your PhD in terms of part-time or full-time. I understand the next question is, I understand that SENSS covers an annual maintenance stipend of 18,600 and the PhD fee. Is there any possibility it could be cover airfare or the NHS visa study for international students? I'm afraid not, and that's down to ESRC rules. The only amount of money we can give is towards the stipend and the fee waiver. In terms of the application, so we can't cover any additional costs. Once you get the funding, you could potentially, for example, one example I can give you is a lot of our students are using some small proportion of the research training and support grant for a rail card. So these are things that are then becoming eligible, but before that, there's nothing else we can cover. Sorry, let me trying to go back into the questions. I graduated over 30 years ago. Would that put me at a disadvantage? The answer is no. We would treat you, almost like a standard undergraduate student, even if you have a master's 30 years ago, there is no disadvantage. Actually, this is information that would not be shared with the thematic panels. So the thematic panels don't get information on, the candidates' qualification characteristics, things like that, because we want to remove as much as possible the unconscious bias there. And what might be worth considering there is thinking, and that is in collaboration with the potential supervisor, thinking about whether you need definitely a refresher of those studies. In a sense, you need to do, some form of a master's or a master's partially. I imagine also, Seki, that over those 30 years, you might have accumulated quite a substantial professional experience, which could possibly cover a lot of those training gaps. So that's something that you could put into the application, together with your transcripts and your studies. So there's not going to be any kind of disadvantage. I think if you look at the characteristics of our cohort at the moment with the previous doctoral training partnership, we had students who were close to 55 years of age, and they wanted a career change or they wanted to do a PhD, and they've submitted a proposal. So we've got a very big spread of different characteristics throughout our cohorts. How many candidates will succeed to get SENSS funding this year? I've mentioned in the past, so I'll give you kind of the sense of how we move from the total application. So we tend to receive approximately 800 applications every year. Out of those 800 applications, the institutions, your home institution, gets to decide who to nominate. So there is an institutional shifting. We usually get from 800 to 200 through that process. So there is a big shifting in that sense. And then from the 200, the 200 go to the thematic panels. The thematic panels review those applications and they nominate students for the final stage, which is the creation of that ranked list. And at that point, we usually get a list which is about up to 60 to 70 students. And out of those 60, we start from the top quality and we move further down that list until we have exhausted completely the grant that we have. At the moment, we're looking overall to allocate approximately 30 to 35 studentship. And obviously the number varies because the more 4.5 years I give in terms of studentships, the less amount of money I've got to allocate, because the 4.5 years are eating into my pot much faster than what the 3.5 years. So just to give you an example, for every three and a half, 4.5 years studentships that I give, I basically lose one of the 3.5 ones, because every single one of those 4.5 have one additional year, which is above the standard. The standard is a 3.5. So in reality, you will be looking at, the top 30, 35 out of those 800 who originally apply. And I'm not hiding behind my finger here. I need to say that this is a very, very competitive process. But at the same time, it's also worth going through that process. And we have had cases where students were unsuccessful the first year, but they were successful the second year, because through that process, you get additional feedback on your proposal, you understand the process better. And we're going to be running these competitions for the next 5 years. So if you feel that this year is too late, to try, if you feel that you haven't established a rapport with the supervisor yet, or you're still searching, this is not the end of the world. The same competition will open in October, November next year for a 2025 entry, so on and so forth, for the next 5 years. How can applicants who graduate 30 years ago connect with supervisors? Well, this is one of the areas where I've covered in the webinars kind of extensively, finding a supervisor. It's the steps I would follow is, I would have a clear idea of my proposal, and then I would look through the 8 institutions, the departments, in which I think my proposal fits. And I would most institutions have also databases around their supervisors, and I would visit the websites of those individuals who I feel are more relevant. A lot of the time, those websites contain information as to whether someone is open to receive PhD students or not. Just to give you an example, in my case, at the moment, I cannot supervise any SENS funded students because I am heavily involved in the competitions. So there is a conflict of interest there. And if anybody comes to me and say, look, I want to be supervised and I want to apply for SENS, I say, I'm sorry, we need to find you another supervisor. So that's the step. And then what I would do is I would send an email to that supervisor introducing myself, telling them a bit about who I am, my motivations for the PhD and why I think they would be a good fit for my proposal. And as I said, if you feel it's too late, remember the deadline for the SENS competition is on the 9th of February, and a lot of the home institutions have earlier deadlines. You could still apply next year, so you could cultivate that relationship with someone over the year and say, look, I want to apply for SENS. I will postpone it for a year, but can we work together on my proposal to basically get it through the process next year? Seki, have I kind of answered that question at all? Um,
Yes, you have.
Thank you. So the
Sorry,
next
I
one
was
is around.
responding in the chats. Yes, yes, you have. Thank you.
Okay, I was looking at the chat, but because there are quite a few questions, I might not have picked it up.
Thank you.
For the program 1+3, so at the moment it's not a 1+3, it's a 4.5. This is the way we call it now. We've moved away from this terminology of 1+3 or +3. It's 3.5 to 4.5 years, and obviously anything in between that. Is it possible or not to take the non-linear MSc and PhD if someone chooses to apply MSc Social Data Science and PhD in Accounting in Essex? So for SENS purposes, you don't need to apply separately for the Masters. For SENS purposes, you will only need to apply for the PhD. And in your application for that PhD, you need to make clear that you're applying for SENS funding. And of course, through the evaluation of your training section together with the supervisor, we will see whether it's recommended to do the full masters, to do partial of that masters, or not do a masters at all. So I wouldn't worry too much about applying for a master's. There is not such thing as applying for a master's in the SENS process. It's applying for the PhD, and then if we feel that you need to do a master's, in the offer letter, we will offer you that opportunity. And of course, what's going to happen is you will start with your master's in October 2024. You'll do a full master's years, and then you will move on to do the PhD. My proposal is looking at racism and resilience in context of refugee experiences. I would say possibly this is more a proposal that I would expect to see in resolving crisis, addressing uncertainty. That's the area where I feel it's the best fit. Obviously, without having a read of the whole proposal, I can't make any extremely informed judgment, but from the keywords, as I've mentioned earlier, for the other keywords that John gave me, this is where I would say, possibly the resolving uncertainty, addressing crisis. Does SENS have any preference for awarding full-time versus part-time students? No, this is not part of our criteria. We are very flexible. We need to comply with your needs. So we don't dictate your needs. If your needs are for a part-time PhD, that's absolutely fine. If your needs are for a full-time PhD, that's absolutely fine. And equally, we don't even ask you why you want to do a full-time or part-time PhD. We take for granted, but there are valid reasons. The studentship, the stipend, the fees work in exactly the same way as explained earlier. So there's nothing there to suggest that, oh, we're going to have more part-time or more full-time students. Generally speaking, just to give you a sense, the breakdown between the two is 2/3 are full-time students, 1/3 are part-time students. And I have seen that trend being relatively stable over the years. Let me just go further down in terms of the questions. My proposal is investigating racial discrimination in healthcare. Yes, it could cut across 3 themes. Having reviewed proposals, we have already done one of the competitions, which is the collaborative competition, as we call it. And this is a competition, you'll understand why I'm giving this introduction. This is a competition that supervisors provide us with projects. We evaluate those projects and we decide which ones will receive funding. And then these proposals will actually advertise post-Christmas. So keep an eye out for those. The advertisements will come through jobs.ac.uk and findthephd.com. There will be 6 to 8 proposals advertised that are out there to recruit students, and you can apply to as many of those as you like. You don't need to submit a separate proposal for those. What you need to do is justify why you fit with that particular project. And the reason I've done this introduction is to make you aware of that, but also I've seen proposals which are from supervisors which are addressing those areas, around racial discrimination, healthcare. And my view is that the most appropriate thematic area there is possibly the health, well-being, and social care. That would be where I would potentially advise you to go into. Obviously, Seki, if you want me, I can have a quick read through your proposal once it's developed, and I can then give you a bit more information and a bit more advice on where to apply.
That would be great.
There are a
That would
couple
be
of very
fantastic.
good. I've got my contact details at the end of the presentation, and I'll put it on there so you can kind of copy the email. There are a couple of very good, strong institutions in health, well-being, and social care. To name 2 of them, because I received very strong proposals. City in London and Lincoln. They're 2 very good institutions if you wanted to do something around that. The ethos of the institution will also kind of be very relevant to the topic that you're selecting. So it's going to be very welcome having a topic like that through those institutions. Next question is, I'm doing masters. All the modules are in progress. It's very serious disadvantage to apply because I have to consider the PhD proposal before the master dissertation. Can you take it? And consider at the pre-selection stage? Well, you're not going to be on your own. Most students that apply for SENSS, unless they have completed their masters already, will be probably in exactly the same way. And what usually happens is panels, the thematic panels that are going to evaluate the proposals, they will be given information around where each student is in terms of their studies. And in that process, we very clearly distinguish between, for example, undergraduate students and students who are doing their masters, because the training is very different. But it's not going to be a disadvantage because a lot of students do exactly the same thing. If you feel, though, that you're going to have a much stronger proposal after having done your dissertation, this is absolutely fine. You could always finish with your masters and then come back and apply to the next year's competition after having done your dissertation and talking to your supervisor. We appreciate that the timeline is not fully aligned with the master studies that people are doing at the moment, but I can reassure you that this is exactly the same across all DTPs. We have across all the DTPs in the UK, all 15 of them, we've got very similar deadlines. And we do it because it's a lengthy process for us, the selection process, and we want to make offers in April so we can give you some reassurance that you know what you're doing in October. I have confirmation from 2 different supervisors from 2 institutions. Can I submit applications for both schools with different research proposals? Now, the answer is that you can submit applications to those two institutions to study for a PhD. You can only submit one application for SENSS funding. So you will then have to make a decision as to with which institution and with which supervisor you're going to apply for SENSS funding. So if you try to submit two applications, the system will flag it up, and one of the two applications will become ineligible. We will probably ask you which application you want to become ineligible, but in terms of the SENSS funding, you can only apply through one institution with a specific supervisory team. Let me go further down. When can we receive the confirmation of success? So I've mentioned that already. We aim to send, so you get informed at each stage of the process. So if your application is successful at your home institution nomination, your home institution will tell you, we have nominated you, you're moved on to the next stage. Equally, the system that we use, the HI apply, will tell you whether your application has been progressed or not. If you're unsuccessful at that stage, your home institution will give you feedback of why you have been unsuccessful. Once you get to the thematic panels, the thematic panels make decisions, you will be progressed. This is when you hear from SENSS. So if your thematic panel is progressing you to the next stage, which is the final stage, we will tell you that we are progressing you. SENSS will communicate with you, not your home institution. And then, of course, if you're unsuccessful at that stage, we will give you some feedback on your application for your personal and professional development. The final stage is when we have this big list. We anticipate that this list, this final decision will be made mid-April. We've got the management board meeting the day after. We send informal offer letters to every single successful candidate, and we give them a few days to respond as to whether they accept or they don't accept that offer. And of course, if we've got dropouts, we gradually go down that list and offer it to the next best person, the next best person, the next best person, until obviously, we finish the full funding. So the earliest you will hear will be mid-April. But if you are not, if you're in the what I call the reserve part of the list, you might hear by end of end of April, beginning of May. And this is when you will receive, final confirmation. But we keep you informed. If you do an application, we keep you informed throughout the process. So it's not, oh, I've submitted my application on the 9th of February and then I'll wait for 3 months, because you will be hearing at least for 2 stages in that process. My proposal seeks to investigate racial discrimination in healthcare. Okay, so I think I've answered that one. And Seki, if you want, we can have an offline discussion about this. SENSS mostly consider the bachelor transcripts. Could I upload transcripts of masters and other degrees that would make my application stronger? We don't only look at the degrees. What I said, the most important thing in your application is that training section. We ask you to provide us with. The transcripts are useful, are good to have, but equally, from a SENSS perspective, when it comes to the evaluation of the application, that usually happens with the information that we have in that training section. Are there limited number of places for each of the themes, or will the strongest candidates go forward regardless of themes? That's a very good question, Natasha, and it's one of those questions that we have debated a lot within SENSS, and the answer is that there are no guaranteed places to any of those themes. So we haven't ring-fenced studentship. So it's not that sustainability and climate emergency will get 4, health and well-being will get 5, so on and so forth. The way it will work is, all 6 thematic panels will submit their scores and the ranking. From those scores and ranking, we create a big list, and we go down that list to award studentship. So there is no pre-selected kind of number of studentships that will go into one of those 3 themes. The only time where we do a kind of a ring fenced is for the three new partners in this DTP, which are Lincoln, Cranfield, and Middlesex. Each one of them is already guaranteed a studentship. So the top candidate from Cranfield, the top candidate from Lincoln, the top candidate from Middlesex will be guaranteed a studentship irrespective of where they are on that big list. Does the chance to be selected depends in any way on the thematic under which the proposal fall? And I think I've answered very clearly that the answer is no. You've got equal chances. Obviously, there are bigger themes in terms of participation of universities and therefore more competitive ones, and smaller themes in terms of participation from universities and therefore they might be less competitive. But in the end, what matters is the quality of your application. Yes, Paula, I will pick up that email if you send me your abstract. I'm happy to kind of provide advice on the thematic area. Right. And Mariam wants to learn a bit more about the training section. So that section has kind of two big areas. One area is where we ask you about your existing skills. And what we do there is we've got a set of topics that we would like to find out whether you've covered. So for example, have you done quantitative training? Do you know how to do statistics? Do you know how to do econometrics? It's not good or bad. It's basically, where are you in that process? Because that then gives us the opportunity to say, actually, this person hasn't done, they're applying for a project which is heavily econometrics based. They will probably need advanced training in that area. So we won't give them 3.5 years. We will give them 4 years, let's say. So that's the first section. And what we want you to do there in the section where we ask you which of those areas you've covered, we want you to give us specific examples. So if someone says, okay, I've done statistics and I have done statistics in that module from my undergraduate, or I have done statistics in that module from my postgraduate degree. So this is the level of information we would like to give us some reassurance that you have done statistics. So it's not simply, oh yeah, I've done statistics sometime in my life, but it's where exactly, how do you support that that statement. The second section is a section where we ask you to think about your project, think about your skills, and match the two and say, okay, this is the project I'm proposing. It will, for example, require an overseas field work with ethnographic approach, where I spend a lot of time in Kenya, talking to indigenous populations, spending time with them. But I haven't done any ethnographic training in my life. It would be ideal to do this project. This is the best methodological approach, but in practice, I don't know how to do it. And this is where, together with your supervisor, we'll make that decision and say, actually, that individual, in order to successfully do this project, they would need to do that training. And therefore, we're giving them 3.75. So we will give you the standard 3.5 plus 3 months, which we give you in order to cover those skills. So that's what the training section is all about. Don't think I've got any other questions. I'll pause here. I think we've covered quite a lot of the questions that I had in mind, and we're getting very close to the end of the webinar. What I'll do is I'll put up the slide with contact details, so you could basically have it there, and you could, as I have mentioned several times, the email you need to use for academic purposes. So if you want to get advice on your proposal, things like that, it's the dep director at senss-ac.uk. I personally monitor that email address, so I will be responding to those emails. If you've got any technical issues with the software, the system we're using, if you want to find out about eligibility, if you've got a problem with your transcript, things like that, please use the admin email, because this is monitored by several individuals in the core team, and therefore they can allocate the question to the different people. So admin and platform issues, use the admin email, because you will get a much faster response to that one. Academic issues, please use the director, and it's one of those cases I try to clear my email inbox every couple of days, so I usually respond relatively quickly. Yes, the presentation and the webinar will be on the website, possibly early next week. I need to download it from Zoom and then re-upload it into our systems for it to become visible. But the presentation and the webinar will be available online. As I said already, there are already 2 webinars that took place earlier in November and December. The recordings from those webinars are on the website, and they're much more extensive. They explain a bit more about the process. They explain a bit more about the criteria we use for evaluating proposals. I'm taking kind of a reviewer's perspective, and I tell you what we expect to see as reviewers. So all that will be available online. I think from my side, it remains to wish you good luck with your application. To say thank you very much for attending this webinar. It has been fantastic. The Seki, the link for the website is on the website you're seeing there in front of you, the sense.ac.uk studentships overview. You will see there are the details for the webinar, and then there is the link next to them, which you can basically click and get access to those. This is why I put the SENSS website on that. So thank you very much for attending. It has been quite interesting. I'm glad that I didn't have to utilize my slides, and there were quite a lot of questions. This is what this webinar was all about. Good luck with your applications, and I hope to see some of those names throughout the process, and obviously see some of you in person next October when we will do our student induction. Good luck. Thank you very much, and enjoy the break if you're taking one over Christmas.